Okay, so we're recording, and that means each of your market centers has a YouTube channel. And on that YouTube channel, you will find recordings. You'll find last sessions and the session before. They're all going to be a little bit different because it's really, using a word we hear a lot these days, more organic. It's really who I'm talking to, who I'm with, and what questions they ask. Is that kind of how we go in our direction of the class? Okay. So the way your book is set up is most of you should be operating off the one that says November 2nd here that I sent out the other day. If you did not get a PDF and would like one, put that in the chat as well, and we'll get one to you. The only difference really in what we used last time is this first sheet. There's been some changes. So when we became KW United, originally we thought we were just going to use the word KW United as on the front page, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But we really need to have KW United - Fredericksburg - Falls Church and - Kingstown. So if you look at the way this document is set up, it's page 1 of the broker's information. So that's going to be for your listing agreement and your buyer's agreements. That's the information that's going to go in that area, and we'll get to that in a minute. Then on the last page of those documents, it's the information below there where it says supervising broker. And this is the email address you'll use in your command to send documents to Shannon, okay? And unlike last time, things have changed here in Kingstown. So Shannon, again, is doing compliance here as well. So for those who are in Kingstown and have contracts in the works and stuff, this is the information you're going to use, okay? So I always just refer to that all the time. Now, what we're doing today is the buyer's package. The buyer's is also a purchaser. The terms are interchangeable. And so these are the documents that are required. And if you see here, the ABA and the cyber notices, they're not going to be in this section. You're going to find them later on in the miscellaneous group. That's why they're numbers with the hundreds, okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, so.
No, oh, sorry. I just mistake.
No.
The woes of having people in the room with you, but I love it. That's good, thank you. Okay, so built in here are these note pages for you to, write notes on, or one of the best ways to use this too is while I'm speaking, if you don't want to interrupt, because I'm in a flow and you're afraid to interrupt me, and don't be, I'll catch myself back up. But you can always write yourself a question here as well. And honestly, do not hesitate to ask a question. You hear people say that, but earlier today, someone said, when we're sharing with agents about command and smart plans, we use these terminologies. Every industry has their own, we have our Kellerisms, our own speak, what means nothing to someone coming in from somewhere else. And you walk in and I'm talking about smart plans and command, and you're like, what the heck is she talking about? You can't find those words anywhere. So ask what those words mean. If you hear me say anything that you're not familiar with, but what I really talk to and teach about is really what all agents in Virginia or Northern Virginia need to know.
Before
Yes.
you move on, is it possible for you to drop this PDF in the chat box? Because a lot of us are operating off the September version.
Okay, did you not get an email from me yesterday?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Okay, will it take this big of a document? It's not a hyperlink. Can I put? Yeah, that'd be great. All right, thank you. We're gonna have someone do that for us. Mustafa. Okay, so our first document is the exclusive right to represent buyer agreement. We simply usually just call it a buyer agreement, but it's important to understand the wording and why it's called this. The exclusive right to represent buyer agreement. By the way, while he's doing that, please make sure your full name. If you didn't get this from me last night, yesterday, that means you weren't registered as of Friday. I guess it was when I got the last updated list. So you didn't get my email. So I need your full name, your email address, and your phone number so that my personal assistant can add it to the roster. Okay. She's going to be checking us in. So when we take our first break, if she doesn't see you online and you're in class, she'll make sure you're registered over there. Okay, so exclusive right, because in Virginia, you're supposed to have an exclusive right, which means the broker and the agent together working on a deal. Now, the broker, you are the person underneath the broker. So Steve Gaskins is not out meeting all these clients. He is designating you as his representative to meet people and to do real estate. So the agreement is between the broker, the firm, KW United, Fredericksburg, Kingstown, or Falls Church, and the buyer, okay? So when you first meet with your client, you're going to read this to them. This is an exclusive right to represent you. Have you ever had a broker's or buyer broker's agreement with any other realtor? Ever? And this, just to see what they say. You really want them, you want to watch what they say. Well, yeah, but it didn't work out. Okay, well, what's the status of that agreement? That's the first thing you as agents need to determine. What is the status of that agreement? If they still have it, then they need to exit from that other agreement before they can engage with you. Okay, and the first thing I do is, well, can you bring up your buyer's agreement and look at your termination clause and stuff? So when we get to that, we'll talk about it. Okay, so the date is the date you're going to meet with your clients and potentially get this signed. So let's say we're going to meet tomorrow, the 5th. So I go ahead and put that in there because I'm pre-doing this, and we meet and they say, well, I want to think about it for a night. That's fine. You don't have to rush back in and change it to the 6th all of a sudden, especially if you've already sent it to them in DocuSign, then I wouldn't change it. But if you haven't sent them in DocuSign, then by all means, change it to the 6th. But it's, it's the date of which the agreement is starting, but it's not an agreement until both parties have signed. So that's what makes it an agreement, really. Both parties have signed. So then the next thing is your client's name. What is their name? You guys, some of you know me as Deb. Some of you might know me as Debbie, but my name is really Deborah. Okay. So in Deport, I am Deborah Ann, because that's what's on my Social Security card. But I have a DBA of Deb and Debbie. Okay. So, but if I'm going to be buying a home, I'm not going to buy it as Deb or Debbie. I'm going to be buying my home as Deborah. Okay. So when you meet with your clients and talk to them, what is your legal name that you're going to get your loan through and that you're going to buy your home in? Okay. And that's what goes here. To be very careful, because you might know someone as George, and that is not at all their name. Or it could be their middle name, or it could be their third name in a name of 5 names. All the different backgrounds we have, and different cultures, and so there could be many and myriad different names in there. So be very careful. I always think about, John F. Kennedy, and he was called Jack. But when you do the history, you can find out why some of these names became that way, because of where they started and because they couldn't pronounce certain letters and stuff. So it's interesting, but we want to make sure. So do not be afraid to ask your client, what is your legal name on your driver's license and on your Social Security card and your passport? They should all match, and sometimes they don't, but they should. And then the firm's name is depending on which office you're with. So KW United. We don't spell out Keller Williams because that's not accurate. It's just KW, capital K, capital W, United dash Fredericksburg dash Falls Church dash Alexandria / Kingstown. So Alexandria, Kingstown, they need both of those in there. Okay. The appointment of broker and considerations of the services and facilities. Broker is hereby granted the right to represent the buyer in acquisition of real property. Acquisition to get or purchase real property. Okay. Buyer's representations. Buyer represents, this is one paragraph I read to my buyers. I always say buyer represents that as of the commencement date of this agreement, buyer is not a party to a buyer's representation agreement with any other brokerage or firm. Now, I've asked that question before we sit down, but now remember, they're going to sign a legal document. Okay. So I reiterate to them, this is exclusive. You can't have multiple people working for you like days of old. July 2012, I think is when it changed, 2012, 2013, when the buyer's agreements became mandatory. Before that in Virginia, a lot of brokers required their agents to use buyer's agreements, but it was not a mandated thing in Virginia. Okay. So people who bought a decade ago, well, I had 3 agents working for me. Well, that's days of old. Okay. So just say this is a new date and time. So buyer further represents that the buyer has disclosed to broker information about any properties that the buyer has previously visited at any new homes, communities, or resale open houses, or that buyer has been shown by other real estate sales associates in any other area where buyer seeks to acquire property under this agreement. So, you know, if you went out, if your client goes to a new homes construction place, they're out driving around the weekend and they see the flags are flying and they pull in there and they've got some eager sales representative who gets their name captured, and that buyer never tells that sales associate that they have an agent, you may or may not get commission from that. Okay. So you want to be very careful when you first meet your clients too, to mention to them, if you go to new construction, you need to give them my card. So, and Drew always tells you guys, get a little stack of cards and give your cards to your clients. So when they do go to new construction or they go to an open house, yeah, here's my agent. So you know, you're kind of hands off as far as that goes. They should still treat you well as far as the open house goes. But with new construction, if they don't have to pay that, they try not to. And some of them do, some of them don't. Same with for sale by owners. I would not encourage my client to knock on the for sale by owners property. I would say, get the information, call me so I can talk to that owner, negotiate commission, because you'll see later on why that's important for your buyer to understand. And then we'll go look at the property. Okay. And so we want to go from there. Okay. Notices. All communications and amendments under this contract shall be in writing and shall be delivered using the contact information below. So paragraph 3, it's saying, oops. For those who've been with me, I have not bought my PC yet. Still got the Mac. Okay. It likes to do its own thing once in a while. Okay. So buyer's physical address, at least one of the phone numbers there. You don't have to have all 3, and email addresses. Now this line is only one email address, the way the system populates over, but when you're doing your command, if there's husband, wife example, or 3 brothers on a deal, one will be chosen as the lead, so the one in first position, and that's who email address will fall in there. But when you go to upload your documents and stuff, the other email addresses will populate over. So I always ask, who is the most responsible person who will read email? And between the couple, they'll decide who's going to be the one who's going to be on here. The reason for this is, let's say that you're on your way to a closing today and there's been a car accident and you can't get there. You're the one in the accident, so you're okay, right? But you can't get to the closing. You call your office, you inform your broker what's happening. Someone goes in your stead, because remember, this is This is the broker, buyer to broker. So the broker is covering for you. So the purpose of this document is so that the broker knows how to contact your client and your client knows how to contact your broker. Okay. Accidents happen. Emergencies come up, but you're not expecting to come up. She was born on a Sunday afternoon, 7 weeks early, my daughter who's with me here. And I worked for an attorney at the time. So when I'm calling him at, 5:30 on a Sunday afternoon and he's in the middle of watching a football game or baseball or something, he was halfway listening to me and he goes, well, we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm getting ready to go in surgery right now to have a baby. So this is where you need to be before the judge tomorrow. Go to work early, look at your calendar. I'm not going to be there. So things like that in life can happen. Okay. It was a good thing, but I wasn't going to be there Monday morning. Now, had I gone under and something happened and I couldn't have communicated with him, that's a different story altogether, So it's being able to have someone able to communicate with your client in your stead and vice versa. Let's say your client keeps calling and cannot reach you. And this is what you say to your client. If I don't respond to you in X amount of hours or within 24 hours, this is how you reach someone in my office because something could happen. So this is how you reach someone in my office. And the email addresses we use here, the reason it's not Shannon's email or Steve's email, it's an email that gets blasted out to several staff members. So there's several people eyes on that email when something does come up in an emergency, they can reach out to that person. It's very important that we make sure we have the information filled in there. I cannot tell you how often I get listing buyers and listing agreements that are blank. Okay. Shannon will turn them back and I will turn them back too if they come before me. Right. Whatever on that sheet. Yeah. So on that sheet that I gave you, that you guys have at the beginning there, it says whatever address says for first page, where it says the first page, that's what this is referring to. And then when it comes to actually get signatures, then it goes to Shannon directly. Okay. So now we have terms and termination. So this agreement commences when signed by all parties, which is the buyers and Shannon or Steve. This agreement commences when signed and subject to the compensation paragraph, which is below, and it expires at 11:59 p.m. on. Now I know that some of you have gone through classes because I keep getting this objection, and I don't know who teaches it, Mosley or whoever, but there is no time frame here. It does not have to be 90 days or 120 days. It can be whatever you and your client want to do. I've known people who've had buyer's agreements for a year and a half, because someone's going to be retiring and they want to start looking at different areas. So it's a long-term agreement. So it can be whatever you and your client are comfortable with. Okay. So whatever that date is in there. Now I would suggest that you make it at the end of the month. We're November 4th today. And let's say it's going to be 3 months. I would do it 3 months at the end of the month. So December in full type, whatever it is, try to get it to the end of the month so that those are your deadline days that you're looking for. And then you take your phone and you put it in your phone that your agreement expires on that day. Then you back it up 2 weeks and say, my agreement with Lead-To expires, on January 31st. I need to get an amendment to extend that agreement. Okay. All right. So then either party, either party, buyer or broker, yourself as the agent, may terminate this agreement prior to the expiration date by notice to the other. In the event buyer wishes to terminate this agreement prior to the expiration date without good cause, buyer shall compensate the broker X amount of dollars or early termination fee in addition to any compensation otherwise due pursuant to this agreement. This is your business and your business plan. Okay. Some agents put 0 in here because they're working for the buyer and the seller's paying. Some agents put $100, some have put $1,000, some have put $500. Your client just needs to understand that if they decide to fire you, they are responsible to pay that, okay? Getting it from the client is a different story, but it is a contract, right? Now, what you need to do for yourself is you need to have a business plan, whether it's in a notebook, a sheet of paper, in command, somewhere, what your plan is. So if you're going to charge a termination fee, it has to be the same across the board for everybody. You can't choose this type of person will get this much and this type of person. The only thing you can do differently is, let's say you're an ex teacher, and you say in your business plan that my termination fee is going to be $500, except for teachers or military, if I'm ex-military, except for military. So you can do that exclusion on a particular type of group, as in a job type of group, or if it's someone in your, if you have like, I know some agents will do certain reductions or certain things if they're part of, say, a hockey team, a traveling hockey team, and they give certain breaks to people from the hockey team type thing. But that just needs to be written down somewhere so that if you're ever audited and they see that you did not collect a fee from somebody and they ask to see all the contracts you've ever written, then no one can claim a fair housing issue against you. Okay, this is for you to protect yourself. Okay? Yes.
Last night, one of buyer, he called me. So he had a buyer agreement. One of the letter he agreement to purchase the house. So he said, next 6 months, he cannot buy the house. If you buy the house, you have to buy this deal letter, this deal.
Okay.
So what is this?
Well, if he has this agreement right here, he needs to read paragraph 4. And if you read paragraph 4, his realtor may have put in there 6 months, but it says that he can terminate by giving a notice to the other realtor. And a notice is a one-way communication. He can simply say to that realtor, I no longer wish to work with you. Okay. Now, if this space is blank here, he doesn't owe that realtor any money at all. If it says $100 or $500 there, then in order to terminate this agreement, he has to pay that realtor that money. That realtor has to collect it. Okay. So yes, they can break the deal because it says so right here. Yes.
These agreements always stay with the agent, right? So you need to ask for the agent to get the copy when you want to get the contract, what date maybe.
Well, no. For an agreement to be a ratified agreement between parties, it has to be signed by all parties, and all parties have to be given a copy. So, and that's a great point to bring up right now. So what happens, because of DocuSign automatically sends everything back out to everybody, agents have gotten lazy and they don't send to their client directly once everything's been signed off and ratified. You should make a point to download that document from DocuSign, send your client an email and say, congratulations, Sue. We are ratified, the broker signed it. Here's our buyer's agreement for your reference. I look forward to helping you buy a home. So they have a copy. I can tell you many times I've had calls from agents. I've been with Steve for 19 years, and we would get calls and stuff would come up and we would say to the client, well, bring out your agreement, your buyer's agreement, your listing agreement. Well, I don't have it. I never received it. So in the true sense of contractual law, they really don't necessarily have an agreement, but it depends on what judge you go through at the time. So always protect yourself, get this back to your clients and do it in a separate email so it's not hung up in their DocuSign somewhere. Right, as long as you can prove that you sent it to them. They may have lost it, correct. And And then you always, and in your emails, when you're working actively with clients, and through command and stuff, you can keep records of all that. The other day when we started Keller Williams in 2013, I was looking for something on my email and it came up with 2013 emails and stuff. So I'm like, should I get rid of this? I don't know if I should or not. You never know. But so it's there. You keep records and stuff. So just know, and to answer your question, that buyer could possibly terminate. Ask them to pull out their agreement and see what it says. Okay. All right. And they don't have to give a reason. A notice just means I'm telling you, I don't want to work with you. I don't like the color of your hair, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. There's no reason required. Okay. All right. So broker's duties. Broker shall promote the interests of the buyer by performing the terms of the broker agreement. So what about if an agent's not doing that? They're not showing you homes. They're not sending you listings. They're not communicating with you. They're not answering you. Well, that's a reason to terminate your deal. But again, you don't have to have a reason. Okay. Seeking a property at a price and terms acceptable to the buyer. I like my buyer to understand this because I say to my buyer, we're not going to see property until you're approved by the lender. And I worked a lot with young buyers, a lot of first-time buyers, and my requirement is that they have to have all their documents to the lender. That means they have to get all their tax records pulled together and their work documents, their W-2s and their bank statements and stuff. And, being a mother, and I always had a mother-like personality, it's always a teaching moment. Because a lot of them are like, I don't even know what you mean by a bank statement, because it's online and they've never actually pulled down the bank statement. They have no clue what their bank statement actually is or what they need to do. So it's a difference between a screenshot and pulling it down as if they were getting it in the mail. So those are teachable moments, and you just go along as if you get that question 100 times, and you just explain to them how to do that and work with the lender. But you want them to know what their price point is. If their high price point is $480 and we're in a seller's market, I am not showing them homes for $500,000. If their price point's $480 and we're in a buyer's market, I might go to $490. I might go to $500, because we would come in and offer lower price. But still, then you got to be careful what's happening in that neighborhood before you go waste your time showing property. So when it's condos, before I show a condo, I go to the HUD site. And if you guys remember, Lisa, write this note down for me to send them the information to the HUD site. And I always double check with a lender if I can't figure it out. But I always make sure that condo is lendable. Is it conventional only, or can a FHA or VA go into there? Because it depends on their ratios. Investors to owners living in the property also depends on their budget. It also depends on if they ever turn their paperwork into the state. So here in Alexandria, I think it's Skyline, there's like 3 separate towers or something over there. And any given time of year, one of them may not be authorized to sell right now because they're under 3 different paperwork, condo paperwork groupings or whatever. And so they've expired. And sometimes they just expired a couple weeks ago and someone just hasn't sent the paperwork over, And now with COVID and stuff, there's this lag of everything everywhere. But you got to be careful because a lender, you don't want to spend your time showing property to a client in a condo situation that cannot purchase there. Okay. You're wasting their time and yours. Okay. Because of the loan packaging, or it doesn't allow it. So you want to, that's where that focus comes in on. And I take a moment to explain that to my clients, right? Because I'm not going to be a door opener for them when they can't afford it. And you're always going to get a client who's going to call you from a Zillow ad or something and say, well, this wasn't in what you sent me, but I want to see this property. And you open it up and it's 100,000 more, but the Zillow ad's wrong. Or it closed 3 weeks ago when the Zillow ad doesn't have it closed. You know, there's always something, because if it meets their criteria and you've done your setup in Bright correctly, they should be getting the feed, right? Or it's outside of where they want to live. Well, then that's the opportunity, you say, to communicate with me and let's update your criteria, okay? So C, presenting in a timely manner all written offers or counter offers to and from buyer. So when you're working back and forth with the listing agent, you just can't sit on those documents for days on end. Now, if your buyer sits on them or your seller sits on them, that's different. But you as an agent needs to move those along quickly. Okay. Now that doesn't mean the instant they come in, you have to send them on to your client. You could be, you know, anywhere, out to dinner with family, at a movie, if the theater's open back up, you know, whatever it is, you could be doing something that you cannot get them sent off right away. But timely manner, you know, within reasonable hours and stuff. Disclosing to the buyer all material facts related to the property or concerning the transaction of which they have actual knowledge, okay? So if you know that there's a house in the neighborhood that had flooding, it's common knowledge, you were aware of it, and the seller has chosen not to put that out there, and your buyer says, well, I want to see that house, you say, oh, well, I'll show it to you, but you need to be aware that there's been flooding there and it's not been remediated and it's not been repaired. Okay, because you have actual factual knowledge. That knowledge stays with an agent even outside of any agreement they have. So if a listing agent gets fired, they still need to disclose that knowledge if someone comes and asks them. Okay. Let's see. Accounting for a timely manner all money and property received in which buyer has or may have an interest. So we don't collect EMD money anymore, thank goodness. We want our clients to send it to the title companies. So we're not physically touching checks. We're not holding on to them. That's the worst nightmare for an agent, is on a Friday evening, your client gives you a check. And you have to guard that check until you can get it to the office on Monday to turn in, you know, depending on if your office is open or not. But even then, you know, some offices have the facilities where you can leave it for the market center administrator or what have you. But we're not doing that anymore. We're going to send them, we're going to have them take them directly to the title company or wire the funds to the title company, which really is the best way to go. Okay. Unless otherwise provided by law or buyer consents in writing to the release of the information, broker shall maintain the confidentiality of all personal and financial information and other matters identified as confidential by buyer. If that information is received from the buyer during the brokerage relationship and satisfying these duties, broker shall exercise the ordinary care, comply with all the applicable laws and regulations, treat all prospective sellers honestly, and not knowingly give them false information. In addition, broker may show the same property to other buyers, present other buyers on the same or different properties, represent sellers relative to other properties, or provide assistance to a seller or prospective seller by performing ministerial acts that are not inconsistent with the broker's duties under this agreement. Broker acknowledges that the seller or seller's representatives may not treat the existence, terms, or conditions of offers as confidential unless confidentiality is required by a written confidentiality agreement between parties. So let's break this down a bit. And we're going to get down into talk about representation here in a few minutes. But your client needs to understand that you represent them. It's exclusive between you and them, between the broker and them, but you're the ambassador for the brokerage. So you have it confidential. And you're going to share with your broker details, because if there's an issue that comes up, your broker needs to understand the parties in play and what happens. But you're not going to stand around the kitchen back there and say to Yessie, oh, and my client Joe, you know, this and that, this and that. No. Now, if you have an issue you want to discuss with somebody, you can use generalities, don't mention name or property address. You never know who's sitting around the corner that's going to hear what you're saying, and that can help them with their client. They might hear that you've got a deal falling through on a property that their client might want to swoop in and get, you know? So be very careful when you're sharing with other agents, and not that anyone's doing it maliciously, it's just confidentiality. And now about the confidentiality part down here. We live in a high profile area around here, whether it's politics or sports. There's a lot of teams around here. So you very well will come across on one side of the deal or another, someone who is in the public eye, okay? So people, so sometimes there's an LLC that's buying or selling the property for them, so their name's not out there. But then sometimes their name is there, or it's their trust. So if you have someone like that and you want the other side to have confidentiality, you need to send an addendum to that other agent and say, you're not to use my client's name or discuss anything about them with anyone, okay? And so that can happen. All right, so it is 10:54. Let's take a break to 11 o'clock, so that's 6 minutes, okay?
Deb, you
Yes,
have time for a question?
yes. Let me,
Okay.
hold on, let me just pause the recording for a minute.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. We're pulling ourselves back together. So it's encouraging to have people here. So,
Are you in the Kingstown office? Are you in Fredericksburg?
Kingstown.
Oh, okay. I would have come in there. I thought you were in Fredericksburg.
No,
Bummer.
come tomorrow. The rest
I'll come. I'll try. Tomorrow I missed that it was tomorrow too, and I made a walk date
that's all right.
with my friend, and so I have to catch you on the recording on tomorrow.
Okay. Well,
Next week.
Fredericksburg will be January.
Okay. So you travel.
In March will be Falls Church, and May will be back here. So, but every other month. We just,
Good. Okay. Awesome. Cool.
so
I'd love to come meet you in person.
yeah. And thanks for doing your homework. So we're going to have a Vanna White over there is going to do a spin for us.
Cool. Fancy.
People.
I love it. All three people.
House with old people. She has fair housing aside. It's on every night at our house by my parents. We watch it. She even knows who George Gabby Hayes is, which most people in this room probably doesn't even know who that is. All right, back to work. Okay. So it was brought up, a question asked during break. No, I do not read every paragraph to my client. I bullet point to them what it says, unless they ask me to define it more in detail or if they don't understand it, except of course, paragraph 8, and we go through that in detail. And it's easier going through it with the buyer in most cases than when we get to the seller. But you do need to, your client needs to understand what they're going to sign. Bottom line, a judge is going to look at them and says, is this your signature? Did you sign this? How many people have read your phone's agreement of usage and all their terms? You know, the tiny little print that it says, do you agree to this agreement or not? Okay. And we all sign stuff like that all the time. Okay. That's for a phone. But when you're buying a home, you're selling a home, your buyer and seller need to understand what they're signing and how they're engaging and how you're engaging with them. And that's the purpose of this agreement, is to detail it out in writing. So if I'm going to meet with somebody in a day or two, or it's a long distance relationship, like those that are working with military people moving around the country and stuff, in and out of the DC area, then, excuse me, when you go into Command and your DocuSign portal, you should be able to print off a buyer's agreement or a listing agreement or a contract with the word sample across it. And that way you can send it to your client as a sample for them to read ahead of time. And I always suggest, here's something for you to glance through, read through before a meeting. And please feel free to write any questions you may have on that document, because I'm gonna have a clean copy for you to sign. And, and electronically, even when we meet in person, I still have them sign electronically, because it's a training moment for me with them to, Mohammed, do you want to shift your chair one way or the other? I feel like we're like, so it's a training moment for me with them if they've never used DocuSign before. Okay. So I just kind of guide them through what to look for. Okay. And the more yourself is familiar with it. So if you yourself are not familiar with DocuSign and Command, because you're new, certainly to Command, a lot of us have used DocuSign through other parts of our lives. And because of COVID, more and more people are using online platforms now. So that's becoming more common. But there's different levels of DocuSign. So when you're working with your client, and they first get it, knowing what happens is good for you to do practice for yourself. So when they get that email and they click on review documents, what are they expected to see when it opens up? So you should do that for yourself. So you see what your client's seeing when they first open up that document, and then you can help guide them through if you're on the phone with them. Because what you're seeing looking at your computer and what they see when they get an email from you is two different things. So it might say when it opens up, you have to say, I consent to this, or click here. So if you're not physically with them, you want to know for yourself what they're receiving. And same with Bright. When you start setting up people with Bright, set yourself up with a search. And so you see from the end user perspective what they're seeing, because you're seeing it from a different perspective than they are. Well, yeah, when it first comes to them, what are they going to see when they click on it? You need to familiarize yourself with what they see versus what you see. And almost everything you do, it's good to know what the customer sees, so you can address their questions when they call you. They should have the word sample across it, because it's coming from your, it's coming from your portal, and your name and stuff is on there. You don't want them to then just go and use that and fill it out to, right. That's the purpose of sample. Okay, so let's see, buyer's duties. So the buyer shall work exclusively with the broker during the term of the agreement. Broker directly or indirectly. The compensation is set forth below. Comply with a reasonable request of broker. I'm on paragraph 6. To supply any pertinent financial or personal data needed to fulfill the terms of the agreement, and be available during broker's regular hours to view properties. This is not Shannon's hours, and this is not Steve's hours. It's not my hours. It's your hours. So you tell your client, I show properties on these days or until this time. What is your schedule? What time block have you done for yourself, for your business? And if you're someone who's dual career, then your time is really busy, and you may have to, it's how you wordsmith, how you talk to your client. One of the things people suggest, and I'm sure your coaches will say to you, I can meet you on Wednesday between 2 and 4, or Saturday between 10 and 2. That doesn't mean you're not available the other times. You're just trying to say, well, I want to go to my nephew's birthday party later on. So you're trying to, if you say, well, tell me what time works best for you, they'll give you something all over the map. So you let them know when you're available, and you try to work it in. Okay. That's more of a coaching tip than a contract tip, but I said it. Okay. Okay. Anyway, available, what times is available. And then also your client on the reverse side, you need to understand your client's schedule, okay? Someone could be working at the Pentagon or in a situation where they cannot get to they don't have their cell phone during the day. So texting is useless. Some of them work in agencies where they have a computer that goes out on the regular World Wide Web where they can have their personal email, and some don't. So I've worked with clients on many different ranges. And so one client, I had to say, when do you take lunch? Somewhere between noon and 2. So when we're working on a deal, I would tell the other side, if they sent me something at 10 o'clock in the morning, I may not be able to get that answered before 2 o'clock today. Okay. I send my client the email stating that this has come up in negotiations, but because of his security level and where he worked, I could not communicate with him. Okay. I wasn't allowed to call in on a landline, but some clients do. Some clients can give you a landline to their work. Some can give you their work email and their boss is okay with that. You know, depends on where they work. Okay. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum, non-security, but they work in retail. They're your Walmart employee who's working on the floor. You just can't be calling them all day long. You know, they're at the check stand. Oh yes, yes. Let's just do that bid. You can't do that either. So every person's job is different. You know, or there's nap schedules with children and they don't want to be called between 11 and 12, or they've got to take their kids to drop off at school in the morning, or they take their husband to meet the VRE train. There's such a different, you know. And I'm not trying to get into any fair housing, but there's just so many things in life that changes our schedules on a daily basis. And so knowing when your client's available and not available makes your life easier too. So if the other agent's calling you, we need an answer right away, and you know your client's not available. They could be at a family wedding out of town. And they might say to you, hey, Sherry, Saturday, I'm going to be at a family wedding. I'm going to be incommunicado from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Certainly send me a text or email, but I probably won't be able to answer. Okay. And that's life. You know, we're not having to give an immediate response. Now, at the same time, you need to explain to your clients, both buyers and sellers, that we have certain deadlines. So if someone is going to be out of town on a Saturday and their deadline is at 9 p.m. that night, then you need to have that discussion prior to getting to that deadline, right? Of availability. So when we get to that part of the contract, we'll talk more about that. So, so buyer is advised against and assumes responsibility for taking, posting, publishing, or displaying any photo or video recording of any property without first obtaining seller's prior written consent. Buyer hereby releases and holds harmless the broker's designated agents, you guys, sales associates, and employees from any liability which may result therefrom. Buyer also acknowledges that seller may have a video and or audio recording system in the property, even if prior disclosure is not made. So a seller might say, nope, no recording devices, and they still do. They have the little teddy bear, nanny cam. They have something on the shelf that's recording. They're being secretive. Never, ever, ever discuss anything about your client's plans to purchase home or any strategy you may have, and write an offer inside that property or in the yard even. Leave the property before you do that. I was working with clients in Reston, and every time they ended up buying the property, so we were there a total of 4 times, and every time we were there, the lady next door was always out in her garden. Was she the lady next door, or was she the owner of that house in her next door neighbor's yard? We don't know. Because my clients, we walked out, I said, let's just go down the street. I'll meet you guys at the Starbucks, you know, and without saying any more. So we were not going to stand there on the street and talk about anything about the house and what our strategy might be in making an offer, or what we really liked, you know, or what we didn't like or whatever. So be very careful about that. And when it comes to taking pictures, your client cannot walk in the house and say, oh, Snapchat, you know, we're here in this home at such and such place, and post it. They're not allowed to do that at all. That's what this paragraph tells them, okay? They cannot do that. Now, you might have a client, and because of COVID, a lot of this has changed, permission is still required. You might have a client who is overseas or out of the state or homesick or has COVID and they're buying a property. And you say to the listing agent, I'm going to walk through the property. I'm going to do a live video chat with my client. Okay. My client's not posting that on Facebook. Okay. I'm on Zoom with them. I'm on FaceTime with them. I'm on Skype with them, but we're not posting it on Facebook for other people to see. Okay. We're walking through that person's home and I'm describing and I did this 3 years ago with clients that were moving in for a rental because they got a job, left the area and had to be back in 4 weeks. And they had no time we couldn't find what they needed. They couldn't buy. There wasn't enough time for them to buy. So they rented that first year and she was 7.5 months pregnant. They had to get back up here before the baby came. So it was this window of strangeness going on. So I got written permission from all the rental properties to go around with my iPad and walk through the property detail by detail. And they rented a property sight unseen, and we signed that document because we had to do it all electronically. And that was 3 years before COVID. So it's more reasonable now with COVID to see. But again, they can't post it on their Facebook. Oh, we saw this property today. We liked it. We didn't like it. No, can't do that. Okay. Purpose buyer is retaining broker to require the following type of property. Bottom line, you're obtaining residential property. That is the easiest, most simplest thing to put there, residential property. Unless they're looking for commercial property, okay? That would be the other thing. The only time I would really be more specific really is if you're working with an assistant or a transaction coordinator who might be setting up stuff for you, say in Bright for searches, and your client has been very specific about, I only want single family homes in this zip code or in this neighborhood. That's significant. So you got to make sure that your search mirrors that search. But if they, because if you go and start, let's say they want something in the city of Alexandria and you just go blatantly into Bright and put in Alexandria, you're not meeting their needs. They specifically said they wanted, well, it's Alexandria City, right? It's the City of Falls Church. Alexandria City, City of Falls Church, they're specific with what they want. Okay, that's when I would probably put that there as a reminder to myself. Otherwise, residential property is the easiest. Okay, compensation. Again, retainer fee is just like the termination fee. Are you going to charge a retainer fee or not? Broker acknowledge receipt of the retainer fee in the amount of, it shall or shall not be subtracted from compensation. So if anyone does charge a retainer fee, they usually do not subtract it from their compensation. And for most agents, this is looked upon as a negative. Your buyer generally, right now, the way it is, and I know things in the market's starting to shift the other way, they're trying to shift it the other way, where the buyer's paying for their own stuff and the seller's paying for their own stuff. But right now, the buyer's agent is still predominantly paid from the listing, the seller. But a retainer fee is, it almost says to your buyer, I don't even have the money to take you around. I need some cash up front, okay? So it can be a very negative situation because they're like, well, other agents don't charge me that. I'll go get another agent. Where some agents have been successful using this has really been in rentals. They might say, I will show you 3 to 5 rentals, and then after that, I'll charge you $100 for the next 3 type thing. Because you don't make a lot of money on rentals, and that keeps you from having to show someone 15, 20 rentals, okay? And driving them all over town. Again, if someone's looking in multiple areas, and I've seen agents successfully use this in that regard, because when gas prices were really high, if they're saying, well, I'm not sure if I want to live in Loudoun or maybe Potomac, Maryland, okay? So you've got this broad scope. Well, first of all, you don't do both on the same day. You choose, like Saturday, we're going to do Potomac, Maryland. Sunday, we're going to do Loudoun. You shouldn't be banging back and forwards. But that's where some people have used it because of the distance that they're someone, and I live out in Culpeper, and some of our agents have brought people out there to look at homes and stuff. And so they're doing that 100-mile round trip, when you're doing long distance or something, you might choose to do that. But again, this has to be part of your business plan. If my business plan says if I'm showing someone homes outside of a 50-mile radius, then I'm going to charge them X amount of dollars as retainer fee, because you're using a lot of gas and effort. Okay. But again, that seems to turn buyers off. So be very careful. But as long as you do it across the board the same. So here, this is where your buyers can get choked up a bit because you can't read fast enough to make them understand. So one of the things you can do is skip down a little bit and then go back up where it says, in most cases, seller pays the broker's fees. So you can simply start there and say, now in most cases, you may have heard the sellers pays the broker's fees. However, this is what the agreement states, that the buyer shall pay compensation in the amount of, and we've had a lot of talk back and forth on how this gets filled in. We all would like to get 3%, but that's not always realistic right now. And so we're seeing things that are 2.5 or 2. So what Shannon and Steve discussed some time ago was we should put in here 2%, okay? So that way we don't have to worry about trying to get an addendum later when it's less than 3. Because at the bottom down here, it says that the broker gets to retain any additional compensation over. So if you put 2% in there, okay, then any compensation over 2% is still the broker's compensation. But if you were to put 3% in there and you're looking at listings that are only offering 2.5 and 2, according to this agreement, it's telling the buyer that they now have to pay the difference unless you do an amendment otherwise. Okay, so if I put 3% in here and I show my clients a property and it's 2% and it's a $500,000 piece of property, and 1% of that's $5,000, right? Right. That means they have to pay me $5,000 over and top of paying for the house. Otherwise, you do an addendum to change it. But if I do 2%, then anything over the 2%, I get to keep according to the paragraph here, the last sentence, and we don't have to worry about going back and doing an addendum. Okay. So that kind of takes the pressure off the buyer. Now, if you're an agent who does the flat commission, what years ago, more than a decade ago, used to be called a flat fee or a flat administrative fee, and you cannot use those words at all. It's flat fee or flat commission. You're safer to use the word flat commission. So if you are going to be an agent who wants to do flat commission, and some agents aren't sure if they do or not, there are many brokerages around here that it's mandated that their agents do the flat commission, okay? So clients are used to seeing it. Some believe they're junk fees. It's how you present it to your client. But again, if you're going to do a flat commission, first of all, you need to determine how much it is going to be. And in our office at Falls Church, I've seen them as low as $295. I've seen them as high as $695. Okay, so that's an extra commission that they're charging their buyer or listing clients. Okay, so you would do 2% on the line here, and then you do plus. And I like to spell out the word plus and not just put the plus sign because that kind of gets lost. Plus, and then let's say I don't do a flat commission, but let's say my flat commission was $495. I do $495 decimal point 00. So there's no confusion that it's $4.95 versus $495. Okay. That is also split with most market centers. Each market center may be a little different, but it is commission. So whatever your split of commission is, it should also be split. Some agents use this because they use that fee to pay their transaction coordinators. Okay, it's kind of, they charge it to the client and that's how they pay for their transaction coordinators. So it's not dipping into their commission. Again, if a client says, I'm not going to pay it, and let's say it's your regular business practice and your client says, I'm not going to pay it. And you say, okay, I want you as a client, and you just cross it out and they initial it and the broker initials it that they're not going to pay it. And then you get audited. Okay. And all the cute little 19-year-olds don't pay that flat fee commission, right? There's a problem there. Okay. So that's why you got to be careful. Some agents might remove it because it's a previous client, and that's in their business plan. So they have a previous client, they've taken off as a courtesy to their previous client, repeat client courtesy type thing. But long as you're consistent with it, okay? Yes.
I had a client that didn't want me to put that percent over there.
Uh-huh.
So if I had home, somebody's paying it, but still they didn't want to sign it. They wanted to be zero, so I had to percent paid by the seller for them to be able to sell it. Otherwise, they would not sign it.
Well, had you put 0, that last paragraph would have covered you too. Really, but yes, it's getting them to understand, because then it goes on to further say that what he was just asking or stating was that he had a client who would not let him put 2% in here. They would not sign it without him putting 0. And then he ended up saying 2% paid by the seller. But had he put a 0 in here, broker may retain any additional compensation offered by the seller or seller's representatives, even if this causes the compensation paid to the broker to exceed the specified amount above. Okay, so it's probably better that you put the 2% just so they see. But now the other issue here too that people seldom forget about is if you're going to ask your client to go back and pay that delta, if you put in 3% and you don't get it, because your business plan is always to get 3% regardless, and some agents have that as a business plan, and they tell their buyers right up front, my compensation is 3%. And if I show you a home because you want to see it and the compensation is less than 2.5%, and the agent's really obligated and ethically to show that home, you owe the difference. You owe the 0.5% difference, okay? And the buyer agrees to it. But has the lender agreed to it? Has the lender said they have enough money to do that? So 0.5% on a $500,000, $2,500. Does that lender even know that that buyer is going to cough up an extra $2,500? In my opinion, you do. Especially if their ratios are tight and they're doing FHA with 3.5% down. They've got a legally binding contract with the broker to say they owe the difference. Now, as a listing agent who, where I've had to offer less than 3%, because it's with the seller's money to get out, just so they could just break even. And I had many, many, many agents call me and say, I will show your home if you will have your client sign this document stating that they'll pay me 3%. I said, my clients will not sign that because I asked them. And you are ethically bound to show your client's property, but that's between you and your client, So, but again, that's what we see happening out there.
For the actual verbiage, does it need to specifically be like 2% of purchase price, or in that line, can you just put 2%?
2%.
Okay.
2%. Thanks for asking. But again, if you're doing the flat commission, make sure you define that out. Okay. And then if within, and I say 30 days is adequate here on paragraph B1. Excuse me for a second. If within 30 days after the expiration of the buyer's early termination of this agreement, buyer enters into a contract to acquire any real property of a type discussed in the purpose paragraph, so above residential property, unless buyer has entered into a subsequent buyer's agreement with another real estate broker. So let's say in September, I had a 2-month agreement that ended October 31st with a buyer. We have an offer on a property, but my agreement with my buyer's agreement ended October 31st, and we don't settle until tomorrow, November 5th. According to this paragraph, I am covered, like a grandfather clause, if you will. I'm protected. My agreement is protected 30 days post the expiration of October 31st if we're in a contract, okay? So that's one way to look at it. I'm covered, I'm protected. So what if something goes wrong and the contract falls through? Okay. You have 30 days post expiration. This says if buyer enters into a contract, okay? If that falls through, you've expired, okay? So even if I'm in the middle of a contract with a buyer or a seller, I always get an addendum extending my agreement period to cover beyond the contract time. Because if the contract falls through, as a buyer, okay, the seller couldn't move, they voided the contract. So now we have to start from square one looking for homes again. If I didn't renew that and we forgot about it and the contract's expired, because we're in that grace period, that grandfathered grace period till closing, and I'm marching along a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, and I don't have a buyer's agreement. And then all of a sudden, their sister-in-law gets their license and says, well, when does your agreement expire? And they pull it up. Oh, it expired October 31st. Well, you don't even have an agreement with them. Let's sign an agreement right now. You have lost as an agent. Sure, they can terminate you with a notice, but it's easier when you've let someone, when you let them expire. So just, watch your expiration dates. If having entered into an enforceable contract to acquire real property during the terms of the agreement, buyer defaults under the terms of that contract. Okay, so that's what we just talked about. Any obligation incurred under this agreement on part of the buyer to pay the broker fee shall survive the terms of the agreement. So if you do have a termination fee to get out of the deal. Now, some people might put expenses. It's easier to prove expenses when it comes to a listing. It's harder to prove expenses when it comes to a buyer. So if you're going to use a termination fee, I would use a flat fee for sure on the buyer side. Relocation program. Okay. This still exists, but it's much rarer now than it used to be. Big companies like ExxonMobil used to be in this area over near where Fairfax Hospital is, and they had a big compound there. And when the market changed drastically, they moved their operations back to Texas. Okay, so they had a relocation company called Cardis Relocation. And so Cardis basically comes in and says to these executives and their families, we're going to move you out of McLean and Langley back to Texas, but we're going to guarantee that if your house doesn't sell here because the market's tanked and you paid $2 million for your home, but now it's only worth 1.3 and you have a mortgage up to $2 million. We're going to guarantee that your property gets sold, and we're going to take care of you down here on this end in Texas. So that's the basic of what a relocation company does for the buyer and the seller. But with that, those who are working with relocation companies, agents, you don't get the benefit of your full percentage. You're sharing it with this company. So Cardis, for example, their commission is 45% of your commission before you split it with your broker. So if you had a client who says, yes, I have relocation, they would check it, and then they would have to give all the information about who their relocation company is, and then you would have to work with that relocation company. And they will say, well, we're 45% relocation. You have to sign the agreement. So when it goes to settlement, right off the top, If it's a $20,000 commission, 45% goes to Cardis immediately. The rest goes to you, then you split it with your broker, okay? And then time the tax and everybody gets it, you end up, so when you come into a relocation situation, unless that's your business model, you want to be very, step back and take a moment. Other companies have quote unquote relocation packages. If you move more than 50 miles or more than 100 miles, we will pay you X amount of dollars for your mover. We'll give you $2,000 to move. Okay, so then you have to say to yourself, okay, I've got a $500,000 buyer, and let's say I get 2% commission, okay, $10,000. Would I want to be their agent, offer them a $2,000 credit? Because see, because when you use their relocation company, it may not just be $2,000. They're going to say, well, you have to give us 25%. So if it's or it could be a Cardis at 45%, or it could be a Weichert at 35%. So even though the client only benefits by $2,000 from moving, if you connect with their relocation company, it's the percentage from that relocation company. So what you say to your client in these situations is, do you have a relocation program if someone's moving from out of the area? Do you have a relocation program with your company? If so, go online to your portal and look what your benefit is. And if it's a flat fee of some sort like that, then discuss it with your broker and say, if I want to credit my client this amount of money, you as the agent do the credit yourself. It doesn't get shared with the market center. But in a case of, say, a 25%, just for math, if it was a 25% referral company and the client benefited $2,000, okay, it's a $500,000 deal, and you got a 2% on there, so that's $10,000, right? So $2,000 credit is $8,000 to you or to the broker, but a 25% is $2,500 to the reload company, who then keeps $500 and gives their client that $2,000. See the difference? So instead of them using the relocation company, you're going to give them the credit, and then save having to pay that relocation fee. But once they engage with the relocation company, you may not be able to extricate yourself from that. The other one is USAA. Years ago, when we were at Weichert, Steve allowed our agents to compete against USAA offers. If you used USAA and their agents, they used to give you $1,600 back in credit. And so Steve allowed our agents to compete against that. So when they were negotiating and discussing, they could say, well, we can give you $1,650, or $1,700. So they could get the deal and not let that referral client go to somebody else. A friend is referred, Muhammad was referred to me by Sherry, and all of a sudden, as a friend, Deb does a great job, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, Muhammad says, well, I've got a relocation company, or I have USAA, and they're going to give me $1,600 back, but I have no idea who that agent is. I said, well, I can match them or do one better. You kind of read your client, And if it's someone who's referred and they trust me, a match is probably going to cover it, So relocation, my advice, if you run into a client who has relocation, call a friend, and say, help me walk through this to understand, okay? When I lived in California, I'm a Virginian, but I lived out there for 6 years, and a friend of mine was a Navy SEAL, and his wife and him lived in military housing, and he retired during the early 90s when they were pushing people out. And so he heard in his exit interview that you can move on your own and we'll pay you the money up to X amount of dollars. What he did not hear was that you have to bring empty vehicles to the base and have them weighed, go fill them up in housing, come back with them filled, and we will, for every pound per vehicle, we give you X amount of dollars. So we all as friends brought our U-Hauls and vehicles and loaded him out of Navy housing in about 2 hours, took him to their new home and unloaded in 2 hours. On a Saturday, on Monday, he went to get his money and found out, and we're like, sorry, Charlie, we're not going to reload all those vehicles and wait for you. You know, he lost out because he did not know what his benefit really was. So,
Is there any real benefit to the personal security program? My last job, when it was something we
yeah, well, some people, you know, if you know, like if you're working with a company that has it and you're their preferred agent, it's volume. You know, you're gonna, but you do like with Cardis, it's a lot of work, especially on the listing side. Everything you put in MLS, you have to mirror in their system, so you really do double work. So it's pretty difficult. It's a lot, yes, for less money, right? So Relo, you know, types of representation, disclosure, information, informed consent. So buyer representation occurs by virtue of this agreement we're talking about, the buyer's agreement. Note, broker may assist a seller or prospective seller by performing ministerial acts that are not inconsistent with the broker's duties as buyer's agent under this agreement. So your client is going to say, what does this mean? And you say, well, our broker, and in our case, KEW United, there's 3 brokerages, okay? If your client says, well, I'm not going to agree with designated representation, and you're just like, well, okay, any listing that's listed by KW United, Falls Church, Kingstown, and Fredericksburg, I can't show you. What? No, I want to see everything. It's like, okay, I represent you, but people in my brokerage, fellow associates that work under Steve Gasson as a principal broker, they have other clients that they represent. I might even represent another client. I might even represent a client who's looking exactly for what you're looking for. And I might be showing them the same properties as I'm showing you because we have agreements with them. So you're not my one and only client, and you're not the brokerage's one and only client, is basically what this means, okay? And that, so designated representation means that they're agreeing that anyone in KW United, they can see those properties. So you would want to make sure you check buyer consents to designated representation. So designated representation occurs when a buyer and seller in one transaction are represented by different sales associates affiliated with the same broker, okay? In the truest sense of the word, that's dual representation on the broker level. But we don't use, it's in Virginia, we don't need to call it that. In Maryland, we have to. But in Virginia, we're talking about Virginia here. That just means that you represent the seller, I represent the buyer. We both work for KW United. So we're going to also pull in another document that states that we're designated representatives for the same brokerage, okay? That just lets everybody know. That doesn't mean that we're going to stand in the kitchen back there and say, well, what do you think? You think we could do this? You know, let's try to figure something out outside of our clients. So that's not what that means at all. It doesn't mean you can't talk to another agent and discuss strategy as far as working for your individual client, but you're not going to go behind their backs to try to cut a deal. So each of these sales associates, known as a designated representative, represents fully the interest of a different client in the same transaction. Designated representatives are not dual representatives, which means you're not representing both sides yourself. If each represents only the buyer, only the seller in a specific real estate transaction, in the event of designated representatives, each representative shall be bound by the client confidentiality requirement set forth in the broker duties paragraph, which we read, and the broker remains a dual representative, okay? Now so dual representation, Shannon and Steve say, no. They do not want us doing, the state of Virginia still allows it. The other jurisdictions don't so much. But it's really hard to represent someone both fairly and equitably. So let's say you're a listing agent and your client bought a house in the early 2000s and has built up a lot of equity, okay? And they come to you and say, well, I think I'm kind of pushing it, you know, I think it'll sell for 460, you know, little townhouse. But I'm okay if it's 440. But I think it'll sell for 460. The one next door sold for, you know, 455, and that was a month and a half ago, and mine's got newer appliances. So let's put it on the market for 460. And you agree, you've done your analysis, and you think it's probably there, and you're gonna put it on the market for 460. Okay, so a week goes by, you've had some showings, and all of a sudden, Samantha refers you a client. Samantha's from out of state, and she calls up and says, I've got a client who's moving into Virginia looking for townhomes, and you meet with that client, you send them to your favorite lender, and the lender comes to you and says their high point is 440. You're like, great, you know, and you got a listing out there for 460. And the client comes to you at 440, and they tell you what they're looking for, where they're looking for it. You plug them in to Bright, and you start sending them listings, and they're driving through this neighborhood, and it comes up, they see this house, they see your face, they pull it up on your KW app, and they call you, and they say, hi, I'm out in front of your listing. Do you think your seller will take a lowball offer at 440? And you know that they will, right? So you're in a bind, because I don't care how much you try to tell that seller that you didn't tell them that, they're never going to believe you, and you've ruined your reputation for any, and your deal probably won't go well. So that's why we don't do dual agency. You know, it's very, very difficult. So just say no. And the best thing to do is refer that out to somebody. You know, someone refers you a client and it becomes in conflict with your own, then just refer it off to one of your friends in the office. Okay. And let them handle it fully. And then I always say this. So the client was referred to me, and I offered them, you know, out to Lead to over there and to cover it. And I say to Lead to, now, when this is over with, they're on my database. Okay. Okay. We don't own people. As much as you want to believe you own somebody, you don't. Okay. They can be on your database from now to kingdom come. You don't own them. Okay. They may have worked well with Lead to, and they might find someone that they would work well with him and refer them to him. He doesn't know me anything. He knows me nothing. But they also might be on my database. They may not even be on his database, because he said, oh, you know, put them on your database, put them in your command. You know, I did you a favor. You paid me the commission, you know, the referral fee, and I paid you the referral fee and I got the commission, and, you know, they're your clients. But they may run across someone who they think, oh, personality wise, they really match up. They would be great together. And they refer him, you know, somebody, and they're in my database, and I, you know, communicate with them. I should not have hard feelings toward him. I'm not the one who did the referral, and nor did he steal a referral from me. And I can tell you, as someone who's worked for Steve for 19 years, I've had these conversations with people, and they just stand before my desk, and I'm like, we don't all get trophies, you know, because it's this reality, you know. I'm not going to work well with everybody. You're not, you know, and sometimes someone recognizes that personality. And on the other side, sometimes you as an agent might say, I can't deal with this buyer. I'd rather refer them to so-and-so because I think their personalities will match up. And you take the referral fee. And sometimes you have to make that tough decision, get 25% of the deal as opposed to 100%. Okay. And it's okay. It's okay to do that. But we don't own people. Years ago, we did a project at Weichert with Steve, and we looked at everyone's databases. We were doing this special program, and I did a spreadsheet organized by names and addresses. There was 5 or 6 agents who all had the same client on their database. You know, because sometimes your paths cross over in life. You know, you might be in the same baseball group, the same church, the same synagogue, and you're going to have crossover. Again, you don't own anyone, and nor should you be upset, and nor should you ever go to your fellow agent with your hands on your hips and say, how did you get them as clients? You know, you know, I just say, oh, they like me better. But anyway, so no to dual representation. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Now, it also says here in bold, any additional disclosures required before designation of dual is to occur with a specific transaction, you have to add it in. So if someone is KW-9ed of the 3 offices and you know you as a buyer's agent, you're going to show that property to your buyer that's a KW-9ed property, you need to get them to sign that designated disclosure statement to represent, to acknowledge the fact that you're showing someone in our same brokerage. Okay, and we'll get to that in miscellaneous documents next week or in 2 weeks. Okay, compliance with fair housing. Need I say more? Fair housing, fair housing, fair housing. Above all else, you have the Virginia Fair Housing. Excuse me, but above all that else, you have the NAR ethical code, which covers far more than Virginia Fair Housing does. So it's everything. You know. Attorney's fees. I'm not going to read this paragraph, but just to, you've heard loser pays all basically, and that's basically what this is saying. The prevailing party is someone who wins. So a party sues and one party sues another party. Buyer sues seller, seller sues buyer, and a contractual, or in this case, buyer sues the broker, broker sues the buyer for performance. More than likely, it's going to be the buyer who gets upset with the broker and they're going to try to take them to court for something they did wrong. And then the judge goes through, because you've got all your paperwork, right? You have all your emails. You can simply say, here's all the communication I had with them. Okay. And on that contract, Your Honor, you know, this is what we did. This is what we did. And the judge says, okay, well, I can't see that you as an agent did anything wrong, or maybe you forgot to cross a T somewhere. So we're going to assign 5% blame to you, which is negligible. But that really means that you are the prevailing party. And the loser has to pay all the court costs, all the attorney fees, any expert witnesses and stuff. Okay. And those could be really high and expensive. I was a paralegal for 10 or so years. Okay, so the buyer does or does not hold an active or inactive real estate license. You look them in the eye and say, have you ever in your life in any state been an agent in real estate? You know? No, okay. 25 years ago, I assisted my mom. I had a client. Yeah, we're talking, and the one who rented, and we're talking, she's signing the buyer's agreement because they're looking for homes now. And I put a note there. She goes, actually, yeah, I got my license to assist someone in Georgia like 25 years ago. I'm like, okay, yes. Yeah. And it's all initial here. So, all right, so disclaimers, professional services. Buyer acknowledges that the broker is being retained solely as a real estate agent and not as an attorney, tax advisor, a lender, an appraiser, a surveyor, structural engineer, mold or air quality expert, home inspector, or other professional service providers. Buyer is advised to seek professional advice concerning the condition of the property or concerning legal and tax matters. So if you're a CPA and you also have a real estate license, and you're walking through a home with your client, and they say, so I hear that when I buy a home, I have certain tax breaks. What are they? And you're a CPA and you know exactly what they are. You say, well, you need to talk to your CPA. They'll say, well, you're a CPA. I am, but I'm not your CPA. We don't have an agreement. I cannot discuss your taxes with you. This agreement only covers me as your realtor. Okay. Okay, so you got to be very careful with that. I find for me, having been a paralegal sometimes, when it comes to issues, I want so much to say to somebody. I can't say that, you know? And so you got to be careful. Plus the laws change all the time. You know, if your client calls you up and say, hey, what's the capital gains tax right now? What's the threshold? You're like, check with your CPA. Yeah, I can't advise you on that. You know, I don't even tell a client to Google it, because Google could be wrong too, you know, because you don't know their situation. And when someone does someone's taxes, you know, throughout the year, you're paying taxes. And then when you reconcile your taxes at the end, now when you're a realtor, chances are you're not going to get any money back. You're going to be paying. but that's what happens. You reconcile throughout the year, basically. And then it comes time when you file your taxes and that checks and balances come out. And unless you're paying your taxes like you should on a regular basis, then you may have paid so much taxes, but then you may have to pay some in the end too. Okay, that didn't mean you didn't pay taxes throughout the year. Just means you, when all your profits and losses and everything were balanced out, you still owe a little bit of tax. Okay, and again, every year that changes. You know how much tax and stuff. So again, I'm bridging that. So you got to be careful for yourself as agents too. You know, the law changes every year on what we can and cannot deduct and how we do things. One of the issues people run into is mold. Okay, not all mold do you smell, and I have a keen sense of smell. What we often smell sometimes could be just like mildew or something. So if you're ever with your clients and they'll say, "Is that mold?" Say, "I have no idea." You know, if you're really interested in this house, we can have an air quality test done. What looks black to me, black's a color. It could just simply be dust on some oatmeal on the wall. You know, you don't know what it is, and nor do you say what it is, okay? And nor do you say it looks like mold, it smells like mold. There could be mildew, there could be a wet towel in the sink, you know, that's smelling the house up and you think it's got mold in it. And I say that because I've been there with clients. You're like, what does that smell? Dirty diaper, you know? So that's discussions for the listing agreement. So anyway, so be very careful what you say to your clients. And on the other side, if you're a listing agent, you get a home inspection report that says moldy substance. Was it tested? Then you can't say it's a moldy substance. It has to be tested for mold. An inspector cannot say moldy substance. Appears to be moldy substance. It has to be tested. And I would, you know, if I was the listing agent, I would say to the buyer's agent, please feel free to have it tested. Have an air quality test done. If there's any mold, we'll remediate, but we're not going to give you $200 because you think it's mold. Okay. Most time, a lot of times it's not mold. It's other things, but you just never know. Also, the word code. I don't get a chance to have Donna Frio. When you were in class, did Donna Frio speak then? I don't get to have those guys on as much because of Zoom and our shortened class, but I used to have Ed Donna Frio come and speak on home inspections. And one of the things home inspectors can't say is it's not to code, because what code are they referring to? That home in that neighborhood in that area when it was built. There's so many things involved in saying it's not to code. Okay, so a home may not have a GFI, a ground fault interrupter plug, you know, the ones that have those little buttons on them to reset it. They may not have that in the kitchen next to the sink because it was built at a time it wasn't required. Now they're relatively inexpensive for most people's minds to put them in. And if I had a listing and didn't have one, I would suggest my clients do it before we go in the market. But again, they're still grandfathered not to have it. So a home inspector cannot say that's not to code. That's a sidebar comment. You can't say it to your client, oh, this isn't to code. No, don't walk through a home and say to your client, oh, your kitchen's not to code, your bathroom's not to code. You don't know. Just because it doesn't have a GFI doesn't mean it's not to code. When was it built? When was that kitchen built? And it could have been to code at the time. So that's why you have to be very careful about that. Megan's Law. Buyers should exercise whatever due diligence buyer deems necessary with respect to the information on sexual offenders registered under Chapter 9.1 of the Code of Virginia. Such information may be obtained by contacting the local police department or the Department of State Police Central Criminal Records Exchange. And there's the information. Now, every now and again, I still get from another agent when I have a listing, I'll get from the buyer's agent, a Megan's Law document. It's no longer required. So I remove that from the package they send me and I let them know. I was like, you may not be aware, but Megan's Law is covered in the paragraph 14 of your buyer's agreement. And it is also, I think, in the contract. as a line item, but we don't need the separate addendum anymore. Wire fraud. Again, have your clients read this for themselves, but just simply say, now as a buyer, no one's really going to know they're out there yet looking for property. So the chance of them getting contacted by someone, unless someone's hacked into their computer and see that they're looking for property or have a contract. But just know that they're going to be contacted from the title company they're working with through a secure portal regarding wire, to wire their EMD funds. Okay. And if they're not sure who's contacting them, they're to call you and you'll make sure they're legitimate. But do not send anyone funds. Now, when it comes to sellers, their listings are out there. They get contacted often, pretending to be companies and say they need to wire funds for this and wire funds for that. Most of those scams should be pretty obvious, but some are very good and people don't, they're so, if you want this, your property, if you want your listing to go through, you have to do this now. Okay.
One thing we run into is that the companies, and they would send an email that looks just like the other agent.
Right.
Just change one letter, I mean, flip 2 letters in the email address, so it looks totally legit, but
Right.
it's not. So
Yeah,
they're sneaky.
Yeah, what Samantha was saying was that a lot of these companies will use a legitimate title company's letter and just flip a couple letters, like spelling, like maybe spelling my name, Deborah, instead of O-R-A-H, they may do O-A-R-H. So your mind just sees Deborah, but there was actually a different email address type thing. So that's why you want to be very, very careful. And just tell your clients, if they have any questions on who's contacting them, they're to reach out to you. Service provider referrals. Broker or one of broker sales associates may refer a service provider to assist a buyer in a transaction. And that can be a title company, a home inspection company, a home warranty company, a termite company, a roofer, whatever it is. Okay, it can be any service provider you refer them to. This referral is not an endorsement, guarantee, or warranty as to the quality, cost, or timeliness of the service to be provided. Buyers advised to independently investigate all options for service providers and consider whether any service provider will work effectively with buyer. Buyer is free to reject any referred service provider for any or no reason. Okay. Now, if you own a company, if your husband owns a plumbing company and you refer that plumbing company to your client, you better darn well disclose that your husband owns it. Okay. And I would disclose it in writing. But that's one point you could be held against if it's something you have some ownership in. But when it comes to other service providers, hey, people in our office have often referred, 1, 2, 3 plumbing service for people. I personally have never used them, but I know they're referred a lot out. Here's their number. I can ask agents if anyone has any actual knowledge or whatever from my office, but you're just referring that company. It's that much closer to knowing someone than someone not knowing anybody in that field. Okay.
I have a specific question about that.
Sure.
So I like to, because I love the title company I work for, I totally am using this and how, even though I don't have a relationship with them now, how would I disclose it? Do I have to disclose, like, these people are great, used to work for them?
You can say that, yeah, I used to work for them, but you're not getting any money from them.
Right.
So as long as you're not getting any money from them. So if you were to refer someone to them and they said, hey, Samantha, here's a $25 gift card. Yeah, no, yeah, you can't do that. Now, like many of us who started the different brokerages, the KW Uniteds and stuff, like when we started the Falls Church office, a lot of people that started that office are investors in the company, and that's how KW set up. And then some people got to buy into Universal Title when that got set up. So we may have a percentage of ownership in Universal Title. Now, if you have more than 2.5% of ownership, I think that's the fee now. It might be 1%. They're working on that. But anyway, you have to disclose to your client that I don't get any money directly from Universal Title for every deal that I give them. So if I refer Sherry to them and we go to closing, David Robertson's not going to slide me money underneath the table because I brought Sherry. But because I have a small percentage of ownership in the whole company, if they're profitable, then I do get a check once a month, but it's different. It's not a tit for tat. Just because I brought a deal doesn't mean I got paid. There's many months I didn't bring a deal, but there's many months I got paid. See what I'm saying? But I disclose that to my clients that I do have an ownership percentage in Universal Title. Okay. And as you guys grow in your business and opportunities come open and available, those are things to talk to your team leaders about, you know, positions and opportunities within KW for growth and other levels. So, so service providers, so just be, and I don't know about you, this has happened to me a couple of times, and you can't take it on personally and you can't fix it. It'll be the time when you offer up a particular service provider and it's an emergency situation and they're on their way out there. And this happened to me, and they were in an accident and their vehicle, their service vehicle was damaged. So it's not my fault and it's not his fault that he got hit and his service vehicle was damaged. But the buyer believes that, well, you refer them to me and now I'm in a jam. You know, there's no blame to go around. It was an accident, the pure definition of an accident. So, so that sometimes that makes us kind of hold back on referrals sometimes. So I know for me personally, sometimes if the personality of the person I'm working with, I'm not so sure, I'll say, you know, I've not personally worked with anyone in this field. Here are some of the, you know, names of people in the office, but I, you know, I cannot guarantee anything about them, but I really want you to spend time, you know, checking them out for yourself before you call them. I know there's a group of septic people out in the country area, and I was talking to one of the agents from Fredericksburg, and she was bringing up this person's name, and I'm thinking, well, they have a really good reputation. Well, it turned out, and I won't say the company's name, but it's like, you know, let's say it's Smith. Well, Smith and Sons does an excellent job, has a great reputation, but Smith does not. So what happens was Smith and Sons was referred to the person, but when they Googled it, they didn't look for the word son. They just saw Smith Septic Systems, and that's who they engaged, who has a horrible reputation. You know, and then in this particular situation, when they call me, I say, well, here's Smith and Sons number, call them to see if they can come and fix it now. You know, and it's one of those things. So if you're going to give someone a referral, also give them the phone number. Don't just give them the name. Make sure they're getting the person you're referring them, you know, to. And you're not required to give them more than one, but if you have more than one, by all means do that, okay? Miscellaneous, this agreement and any exhibits and addenda signed by the parties constitutes the entire agreement between the parties and supersedes any other written or oral agreement between the parties. This agreement can only be modified in writing when signed by both parties. So if you had to do an amendment to change your compensation, it's the client and the broker who initial it, not you. Okay, it's not valid if you initial it and there's a change in the compensation. It's you and the client and the broker. So if you put in your, you know, you're going to put in 3% and it's a 2% listing, and you have to go in and say, change that, you get an amendment and say buyer's broker's compensation reduced to 2%, then it's Shannon and the client who signs it, okay? Other provisions, there might be something that your client is sharing with you that you want to make sure. And you can also use this area right here to do specifics about what they're looking for. Like they want a pool, they want property enough for a horse or for 3 horses. So that depends on the county. So you may have to do some investigation, find out, you know, what the county rules are. You know, I don't know what Haymarket is now, but years ago you had to have 3 acres per horse. My brother used to live out there, you know. And then when they lived on a property they bought, in order to keep it agricultural, they had to do something agricultural. So they boarded a horse, you know, and that meant, so they kept their, you know, their tax structure. So it's different everywhere. Again, that's not for you to determine, except you help your client figure it out. You know, if they're looking for properties, can it have a pool? You know, does that neighborhood. You know, since COVID, that's one of the big things out there is pools. It's almost impossible to buy a above ground pool these days. They sold out by like June, July, pretty much countrywide. So anyway, so any other provisions that are in there, buyers should consult with buyer agent before visiting any resale or new homes or contacting any other real estate agency representing the sellers to avoid the possibility of confusion of the brokerage relationship, misunderstanding about liability for compensation. That's why you really you really need to have a good talking to with your buyers. And you have to say, you know, now this agreement is between us. I represent you. You need to run everything through me, even when you're out driving around. You know, if you call me on a Saturday afternoon and you're getting really close to turning into that new construction place because you're so excited, that's okay. You can go without me. You just have to make sure you write my name down. My sister and brother-in-law bought a place in Fredericksburg in a 55 plus community. Again, they weren't planning on doing that. Their friends lived there. They were starting to open a new section. Oh, let's go over and see. Their friends are dragging them over there to go look and look. My sister knew, and she says, my agent's name is, and she texted me, in case you get a call, this is what we're doing, you know? So when they did their contract, I was there with them for the 3.5 hour contract meeting. I was there with them, just sitting there listening, making notes, you know. But, you know, I earned my money. I went to their inspections and stuff like that. Even when the contractor people said, oh, you don't need to be here. I'm like, oh, no, I need to be here. Because you need that extra set of eyes, you know. Okay, so then here is where your buyer signs and the broker signs, Shannon. Now down below the line, see this little line here, this asterisk line? It's called below the line. This stuff, what's below the line is not a party to the contract above. It's for information purposes only. But you want to fill it out because this is where you get to be memorialized in this deal. This is where your clients know your information and how to contact you. So you fill that out. If you're part of a team in Virginia, then you put your team name there. And then for supervising broker information, when you look on your sheet that you guys have, it says for broker information, you put that information there. Yes, Mr. Swirsky, do you need something? No. I just didn't know if you want to say something.
No, I just came to observe.
Okay, that's fine.
Make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, please do. He was he was a difficult student. It was a one-on-one session. So anyway, supervising broker information. So in everyone's case in this room and on Zoom, that's going to be Shannon's name. Okay, it's not going to be the Keller Williams. The email is going to be Shannon's email address, slauterstein@KW. And then whatever information she gave you for her phone number on that sheet. Okay. So there concludes the basic of the buyer's agreement, which is a 5-page document. Took us 2 hours to go through. But now you've read it. You can say that you have had it read to you like a bedtime story. So don't be falling asleep on me.
When you go through and give this to clients, obviously you don't do the 2-hour version.
No.
So what is there a way that you could show us kind of your footnotes version, or how long does it usually take you to get through a contract with somebody? I just don't know what is like. What do you normally omit, or not omit, but like what do you normally like not go into detail with?
Okay. So the question from Samantha is, when I'm meeting with a buyer, and your coaches will go over a lot of this stuff with you too. Did you want to address that, Drew?
I don't want to get the.
No. Well, but you know, everyone's different and your personality is different, how well you know it. Because I teach it, I probably know some of the verbiage better than others. And so I always take with me a hard copy. I have my laptop with me, but I always take a hard copy, 2 hard copies, one for me and one for the client. I don't always bring mine out. It's usually in a notebook. You never know where you're going to run into internet issues. You never know when all of a sudden, you know, it's overcast and your cell service is going out. You never can assume that you want to connect with your clients if you're at their home, like for a listing, for example, that you connect with their internet. You know, with COVID, people aren't really coming to the office to meet with you. Depending on where you live, you might be meeting them at a Starbucks or a Chick-fil-A or something somewhere. But if I'm sitting across the table from them and I have them looking at it hard copy instead of on the screen, it's just easier on the eye. They see the whole page. And I just kind of bullet point down through them. I just, I just paraphrase what it is. And then when I need to get into like paragraph 2, I really make sure they understand. I look them in the eye. Do you have another agreement? Because this is telling me you're going to sign this document that you have no other agreement with anybody else. And like I said, when they start squirming, chances are they have an agreement with somebody else. It's the body language, or the husband and wife look at each other and they're like, that type of thing. And then the details of, paragraph 3, that's a detailed. Now, as much as I know ahead of time before I go meet them, I pre-fill this in. So I give them a pre-filled in copy. And with a buyer's agreement, there's not a lot of things that are different. Whereas a listing agreement, you've got to get a lot from them. So most of it is 100% complete. I'll go ahead and project, say 3 to 6 months in my term and termination, but they might want to change that, or I just change it online. Okay. And then as they answer questions and stuff, again, the more you know what your buyer's duties are, pick out the one about, just say, I want you to understand that, you're going to pay me directly or indirectly. And indirectly really means coming from the seller. And it's traditionally how we do this. So when we get down on paragraph 8, I'll explain that to you. But I just want you to know that that's, and you're promising me that you're not working with anybody else type thing. Okay. Now I always ask my client, do you want a few minutes to look over this yourself and read it? Okay. And then again, I spend some time on the compensation, reload pretty quick. You're not. We talk about the difference between designation and dual representation pretty quickly. Designation means that, like I said, anyone that's in your brokerage, in our case it's the 3, that if you're working on a deal with someone else in the other office, it's considered designated representation, and we're going to sign an agreement. We're not going to do a dual representation. I'm not going to represent you and the seller both, and you go, and then compliance of fair housing. The attorney thing, I just paraphrase that to loser pays all. If you bring suit, the court finds you at fault and you've lost, you're the one paying the fee. Again, are you ever been a real estate agent? Pretty quick. And then this stuff here, just bullet point about, the services and stuff. Just a quick little synopsis about what it is. Okay. And then I always ask them, do you want to read this for yourself before you sign it?
You send them early?
I do my best to give it to them early. And I was going to ask Joe if he does that. If I know I'm going to meet someone on Saturday, and here today's Wednesday, I would go ahead and send this to them, filled out, and say, here's an advanced copy of what we're going to go through. Like I said, make some notes if you have any questions about anything. I'd probably say 8.5% of the time they never read it. Okay. There's always going to be that, I don't know if you guys know about the DISC profile, but the C personalities, those accountant type people, they're going to go through and read it. They're going to, if there's a misspelling in there, they're going to let you know,
Those are fun when you have an entire loan package.
Yes, right. And there again, that's a perfect segue. Since we've been in COVID, we haven't had DISC classes. But if you get a chance to go to a DISC class, Sheila Quadros used to do them for us. And we used to be part of boot camp. It's just a quick synopsis of understanding people's different personalities. So you can identify with your client what type of personality they may have. So if you know you have a S or a C personality, they're very detailed people, the accountants and stuff of the world, the administrative people, they're going to be very detailed. And so you might want to make sure that the title company gives them the paperwork ahead of time, and that the lender has given them the paperwork ahead of time so they can read, because they're not going to sign it until they've read the whole thing. And if they go to settlement and they're sitting before John here or David or, our different people in our different offices, and they say, I want to read everything here. David says, okay, I'll be back in 2 hours, and they have to read it. Okay. because he cannot force them to sign something they have not read. But nor does David have to sit there and read it to them, nor does David have to sit there, and nor do you. You are not required by law to read this to your client. I read it to you for your understanding, for a discussion, for you to familiarize yourself with it, for you to be able to go in and write your first buyer's agreement, you know. So what's going to happen, you know, Friday night, Saturday, you know, you've been in the business all of a sudden, and you're going to get a call, and they're going to say, hey, Sherry, you know, I just referred so-and-so to you. They're going to call you in 15 minutes, you know, and you're like, okay, you know, and then you're on the phone to me, Deb. I'm like, okay, get your notebook out. I don't know where it is. Okay, I'm gonna send you the documents. You know, get your command open. This is what you're gonna do. I do this a lot. This happens a lot, and I love it. You know, you're not bothering me. You know, ask Elisa. She's an only child, but she used to tell people at Weicker that she had 100 brothers and sisters.
This agreement we can use Maryland, DC, and Virginia.
No, this is Virginia only, guys. Virginia. If you are an agent in Maryland or DC, there's a Maryland file and there's a DC file. Yeah, I taught in Maryland back, I think it's when I got sick, wasn't it? Back in August. It was enough to make me sick. Yes, sir.
Miss Dave, when we sending through email to the exclusive, right? Then we gonna send only those copy or the other depot as well, just only this copy?
No, I send the whole package to them. So good question. When I send in advance the package and I send it as a sample, I send all the documents that are on your buyer package, you know, and I say to my client, so the first 5 pages as our agreement. As the other pages are added to it, it becomes the agreement in full because they're disclosures and add-ons that were required by the state or by our brokerage for us to add on. But right here at the very last paragraph, it says to us, not there, the other one, anything, where's it go? See, I don't know this as well. It used to be in bold, but any additional disclosures is required before designation of dual. So that's one of them. But anything added to this document becomes the whole. Okay. So everything is together. So when you first do an agreement, you have the brokers, the exclusive right, then you have your understanding, okay? And we're gonna go through that next. Not your understanding, your understanding your rights and obligations under the condo. Now, you give this to your client. It's for them to understand the Condo Act and the HOA Act. These things used to be part of our contract. Our contract was 15 pages long. They've got it down to 13 pages because they extracted all the rules for the condo association. Now, this is one document I don't really read to you guys. That'll be your homework. Yeah, I came up with an easy homework assignment. So put that in the chat line, Elisa. Read the understanding your rights for tomorrow and show up to class tomorrow. Yes, Wednesday, Thursday this week. I was at doctor's appointments yesterday. Yeah, that's why I normally don't teach on Wednesday.
No, I just saw the thing from Facebook.
Yeah, somehow we missed the 5th. So guys, we do have class tomorrow from 10 to 1. And then the 10th, the 12th, the 17th, and the 19th. Okay. So spread the word. Thank you. I'll put a message out.
No, I appreciate it. I'm sorry, the next one's at the 10th.
Tomorrow, and then the 10th is next Tuesday, and the 12th next Thursday, the 17th the following Tuesday, and the 19th the following Thursday. Okay. 10 to
I'm
1.
really glad I'm not the only one that did that. Because I don't know how I just skipped it.
It got missed on the, it was my fault. It was a
No, it's on there. I went back and looked.
well, they corrected it. They corrected one.
Oh.
The original one had it missing.
Oh, okay. Maybe I was looking at the.
I was trying to say I couldn't do it on Tuesday. I would do it Wednesday, but then I forgot to say, but Thursday still stayed in place. It was one of those weird communications.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want you guys to read this document because you guys need to be familiar with what the condo unit says, the homeowners unit says, and I want someone to tell me tomorrow what happens with violations. or you guys can write it to me in a text or an email, and I can do a drawing if you want for a $10 gift card. So, yeah, what are violations if a HOA or condo has violations? What does the document say about violations? Okay,
I'm sorry, is it for HOA violations only you want the answers to?
and this 4-page document, HOA or condo, if there's violations, what does the law say? What does the law say? Okay. So read through what the rules and responsibilities are regarding let's say violations. Make sure you understand timing of delivery, and make sure you understand, and we'll discuss it tomorrow, and make sure you understand how to get out of it. Okay, that's enough homework. How to get out of a voided deal based on HOA and condo. Okay. So useful information. Well, this is weird. Sure. We're gonna plow on through. I'm not gonna take another break. If you is okay. Are you guys okay for another 30 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So this document, useful information. This is your glossary, and is your guys messed up like this? Does it have like about cross through and all that? Does it say useful information and the word about real estate looks like it's missing?
Yes, that, it looks like that on my side.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's gotten, that's weird. I will redo that and send out another copy, but now it's okay. That's weird.
You're probably going too fast.
Maybe. Okay, so this is your glossary. What's a realtor? What are services? What are legal requirements? What's financing? This is your dictionary for your clients. So the one you might stop and pause on a little bit, you would want to make sure they understand about insurance, especially when you're working with first-time home buyers, okay? They've never had homeowners insurance. So you're working with first-time home buyers, and what I say to them, hey, who does your car insurance? The general, or whatever. It's like, okay. So they say, one of your assignments as we're starting to look for homes is I want you to go out and call 3 insurance companies, get referrals from family or friends. Here's a few, and call 3 different insurance companies and tell them you're buying a house in this range. There's not going to be a detailed estimate for you because they need the house in order to do that. But you can start talking to an insurance company about what their fees would be, say in North Springfield, a home that's worth $500,000 type thing, okay? A Rambler or a split level type thing, and then and have them start engaging. And I always say to them, now remember, you're buying a home, you're gonna have homeowners insurance. Again, I'm not an insurance agent, but some insurance companies, because you also have a car or cars, you might get reduced rates. So talk about bundles. And people who've never had homeowners insurance, they see the commercials for those companies, but it doesn't sink in because it's not, do you guys know about the reticular activator? Okay, so because it's not in their forefront of their mind, and it certainly hasn't hit the reticular activator, they don't hear those commercials. They don't understand what bundling it is because they don't own a boat, they don't own a home, they don't own 3 cars. So they don't understand that you can have reduction of your car insurance, perhaps, because every person's different. Their age is a factor, their driving record's a factor, where they live is a factor, So, but just say when you're talking to an agent looking for home insurance, and a good agent's going to ask them, what kind of cars do you have, so they can bundle, And I said, and more than likely, they're going to offer you life insurance too. So you have to look to see if you have a policy already somewhere else. But you need to start lining up, because when we get to the contract, I'm going to tell my client, you're going to see when we get to the contract, you have 7 days once we're ratified, to get your lending in order and get your insurance in place. So if you haven't started calling somebody now and knowing who you might reach out to, you might call XYZ insurance company and they say, well, you're 23-year-old. Yeah, you're going to have all these extra fees. Or you might call this other company and they don't have those extra fees. So you want to know up front, you know. I don't even know because I have a daughter and she's only 19. But I remember years ago when my brothers got their license, my parents, or the boys had to pay. We all had to pay for insurance, but the boys had to pay more insurance than we did. And then you couldn't rent a car until you were 25 and all these things apply. So things are out there. So insurance, you know, every person's different and what they're going to cover. Okay. Then the FERPTA, you know, this paragraph says that section 1445 of the Internal Revenue Service Code, the Foreign Investment in Real Estate Tax Act, or FERPTA. So you hear agents say, oh, FERPTA, FERPTA, FERPTA. It stands for Foreign Investment in Real Estate Tax Act. May impose a duty on a buyer to withhold a percentage, and I read this to my clients, I have them read it, understand it, to a buyer to withhold a percentage of a minimum of 15% of the gross sales price when the seller is a foreign person for the purposes of U.S. income taxation when the property is located within the United States. A foreign person includes, but is not limited to, a non-resident alien, foreign corporations, foreign partnerships, foreign trusts, foreign estates. The seller has to check the right box on the residential sales contract and attach a FERPTA addendum to the contract. In addition, the seller should inform the settlement agent of possible withholding under FERPTA prior to settlement date, because there's paperwork that has to be done. The settlement agent may require the seller and the buyer to execute certain IRS forms, okay, which may include the seller and buyer's tax information, social security number, and submit the required withholding on behalf of the buyer. Both the seller and the buyer should seek competent legal, tax, and or financial advice concerning this issue in advance of settlement date. So because the onus is put on the buyer under this withhold a percentage of a minimum of 15%, so you as a buyer's agent, when you're writing an offer, and we'll go over this again next week, when it comes to that FERPTA, if the agent hasn't provided online, whether it's needed or not, in my initial conversation with the listing agent, because I always call a listing agent before I make an offer, find out, you know, what their, if they have any wish list for settlement date, you know, anything that I should need to know that may not be on the listing. And I always say, do I need a FERPTA addendum? And it's interesting, someone will say, huh? Is your client a foreign investor? Well, I don't think so. What does your listing agreement say? Well, I don't know. Because they didn't ask. They did not open up their listing agreement. Oh, shoot. I didn't go, I don't think I hate when I do that. I don't think I restarted the recording again. Is it? Oh, good. It just dawned on me. I'm like, oh no. You know, so you have to ask. Never assume by someone's name, the way they talk, what color they are, that they are or not a foreign investor.
But the listing agent doesn't have.
The listing agent needs to ask their client. Because it's one of those companies who allow their agents not to complete the listing agreement in full. They do the first page and the last page, and that's about it. You know, they might do the conveyances. And we have agents who try to get by with that. And Shannon and I are like, no, you know, no. And we get to the listing agreement on tomorrow, we'll go over more about that. But again, because they've made it incumbent upon the buyer, it's your duty to ask so that when you're making that offer, that field is already filled in. You've already checked it, it's a foreign person or not. You're not relying on the listing agent to get the seller to check it. Because then once they do it, then they have to initial, then the buyers have to initial, right? So it's better to get it done up ahead and ask for it ahead of time. Master plans, when they start talking about master plans, there are neighborhoods, you know, prior to execution of a contract, buyers may review applicable master plans for appropriate jurisdictions, including maps showing plan use, proposed for actual parks. So if your client really wants to know what's being built next door, they can go to the county and look to see what's there, okay? If you know for sure, 100% sure that they're putting a gas station in there or they're putting a Wegmans in there, you can tell them, but chances are you really don't know 100% sure. There's so many rumors going around, what's being built where, you know, out by us in the country, there's a piece of land, Cleveridge Corner, 800 homes, combination, grocery stores, you know, no one knows. We can't imagine 800 homes being built in that little, but property condition, environmental matters, various inspections. So we always talk about a home inspection, but there's other inspections that could happen. You could do air quality, you could, you know, which includes mold. Someone could be doing a pool inspection, a septic inspection, a water inspection. So there's multiple inspections that can happen. And at the end of the deal, there's a walkthrough inspection. So your client, you know, when you're talking inspections, you have to be specific as to what the inspection's for. So again, I don't read, you know, I have them, if they're interested in home energy efficiency, that gives all the websites for them to go to. I don't claim to know anything about any of that stuff. I refer them to the experts, okay? Types of real estate representation. So we kind of go over this a little bit. I don't read it to them, but I point it out to them. You know, in an individual real estate transaction, if a broker firm has a contractual obligation to represent a buyer or seller, then the broker shall promote the interest of the client by exercising the ordinary care by. And this is already kind of covered for the most part in our broker's duties above, but it just goes into further explanation for the buyer so they understand what your duties are. And again, if they want to read all this and understand it, that's up to them because they are going to sign it. But I don't go over this because it's more of a glossary and dictionary. Again, residential property disclosure. So this is the newer document that just came up in July. We used to have another one called understanding, but this is again the similar type of thing. It's talking about different types of property, what adjacent means. So this is another type of a dictionary, a glossary. It states up front that this is the Virginia Residential Disclosure Act that governs information of owners must disclose to prospective purchasers of real estate transactions. But remember, Virginia is a buyer beware state. So an owner may or may not say that something's wrong with the house, but if you as an agent know, you have to disclose it. Okay, but this goes through and details out what condition means, what an adjacent parcel means, historical district ordinances. So same type of thing, sexual offenders. Again, that's Megan's Law, it's in everything. But you are never going to say to your client, yeah, there's a sexual offender next door. That is not up to you to say that. It's up to them to go out and look for it. I grew up in Pemmon Hills, and I grew up next to a neighbor. Let's say his name was Joe Smith. And when I first taught this class, I thought, oh, it'd be cool. Let me just go in and look up sexual offenders around my house. And this name pops up. And I'm like, and this is, you know, early, you know, the internet wasn't as fast and it took a while for the pictures to come up and my heart stopped. Like, I grew up next to this man. Well, there are two men of the same name, middle initials different, in the same neighborhood. One lives on one road and one lives on the parallel road to them. They're that close, but they have the same name. But their middle initials different and their faces are totally different. So I did not grow up next to the one that was the predator. But, you know, so if you say, yeah, there's a Joe Smith in the neighborhood and they know the other Joe Smith, you know, that's why you don't say anything. You let them look it up, let them look at the pictures, the addresses and such, okay? Again, this is more of a glossary, and I tell that to my clients. I said, this is a glossary, a dictionary of terms that are used that you may have questions about, okay? This is for your use. It's your acknowledgement, like marine clay. We don't need to explain to them what marine clay is. You might stop about radon, you know, and say, now radon, and read this to them or ask them to read it. because radon is naturally occurring. You can never say to your client, oh, I've sold homes in this neighborhood for 3 years and no one's ever had radon in their home. No, because they could be the one home who has it. You never ever, you give them the option. It's roughly $150, but if anything's wrong, the seller pays for the remediation or it's negotiated. If the seller doesn't pay for it, the client doesn't have to buy the property, right? But you never want to, I had a dearly beloved client who said he wasn't going to do radon. I'm like, what? Why? Well, it's a little expensive. And I said, didn't you just tell your dad you're going to buy this $300 pair of shoes? I said, no. I said, I personally, he was a family member. I said, I personally think you ought to do radon and hold off on buying those shoes. But, you know, because this is your life involved here and your family's life, you know. But again, I can't make them and compel them to do it, but I can say, you know, in that situation, what I feel. If someone asks you about defective drywall, you don't know if a house had defective drywall in it. And you can say, well, I know in our area, most of our places around here didn't have it. Okay, that's hearsay, that's speculative. You know, we don't know for sure if someone went somewhere else and bought the bad drywall, so we don't know. But here's what the law says about the bad drywall. Okay, dams and structures. So again, and then, you know, there's, you know, different disclosures depending on where they live. They may have different disclosures that they have to complete. And you're just acknowledging it. Now, as you notice on page 20 here, there is no signature line. I just drop and drag initials in here. Because if the office is saying we have to give this to our clients, I want some proof that I actually gave it to them in their package. So, because I can upload a blank one into Command, but I want to put my initials here. So you can choose initials or signatures. Either way, it's just an acknowledgement, okay?
For them to initial, right?
Yeah, the buyer to initial. Shannon only initials the buyer's agreement, okay? So are you ready to spin over there, Vanna? Okay, so we have Alicia Strickland, Nisi, Gala Miller, and Dina, how do you say your last name?
Pending.
Handy. So you got the three of them in there? Okay, let's spin. I'm sorry, I don't have it live to show you guys. Are you spinning online? Oh, no, I'm not sharing with you. I've got to figure out how to share that. So. Alicia, yay. Okay, Alicia, are you there?
Yeah,
Okay, you won
I'm here.
$. So send me
So kind, thank you.
a text on where you want it from and I'll email it to you.
All right, thanks. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Huh? Yes. So now, of all the people here in the room and on Zoom, only three of you guys did your notes. Well, you weren't signed up. Okay. So the notes to me are the easiest homework to do to get. And may have not covered the cost of the stamps, but that's a tax expense. So we have sponsors that'll come on. So that one was done on behalf of Joe's Flagstone and Landscaping. So he always does the first one for us. And so I'll give a $15 gift card out. I'm going to push him to do an extra $10 for tomorrow. So you guys come in with some comments about the homework and Ms. Vanna over there will put everybody into a spin cycle and we'll draw someone for a $10 gift card, okay? So any questions about what we've discussed so far? So you're going to be with your client, and if you go to the table of contents, okay, tomorrow we'll discuss the ABA and the cyber when we get to the listing agreement, because it's a lot of these documents are duplicated in there. So like Shannon shared with you guys at the beginning of the class, you're going to go in and pull up, and this is strictly Virginia now. Now we have some of these same documents that, like your ABA, which is affiliated business agreement. That's the ABA is the agreement that each office has with our different partners, like Universal. So Falls Church, we have an agreement with Universal and Highlands, SGS Property Management, and Cinch Home Warranty. Okay, which means those entities give the office X amount of dollars per month to pay for their desk. You know, they may rent an office from us or something, but they're helping to support the office. So no matter how many deals we may give to them, each month they're giving the office. So that's our partners who are providing money to Keller Williams. And what that money does, so you guys understand, is that money comes in and gets added to our income. So then you have the income from the deals that happen to close that month, because in Keller Williams, we close out every month. Have you guys heard the word transmittal being mentioned? Okay, so what Keller Williams does is on the last day of the month, the business stops for that month. And everything that happened in that month, so in the month of October, because we're in November now, so right now, the first 3 business days of every month, the MCAs, the Market City Administrators, and what was her name, Ozzy? Okay, so Ozzy, and then you've got Sheila, and then Debbie Martin at Falls Church. They reconcile, like an accountant does, the financial balance sheet of the office. You know, I'm doing simplistic form. So they have all the profits that came in, and the money that we get from our partners that we disclose to our clients, and that's what this document is a disclosure out to our clients that we have a business affiliation with Universal Title. We have a business affiliation with Highlands Mortgage or whoever's here. And then all that money comes in as income. Then we pay our bills out. And what's left over is the profit for the office. And then the profit in the office is divided between those who've invested in the Market Center as the ownership or investment team, and those who have encouraged other agents to come in that they've sponsored. So every one of you has been sponsored by someone here in the office, okay? Then you have the opportunity to sponsor people from brand new agents or affiliates from other companies coming in, and they become your downline. So when the office shares profit, so if the office, let's say the office had $20,000 worth of profit this month, okay? And Sherry, you're the one who sponsored Dina, for example, okay? And he had in October, he had a closing. So they assigned so much money, so much of his closing, his share with the office goes into the income category, and there's a percentage amount assigned to it. And then, and this is very simplistic, people teach this really well, but simplistically, and then you get profit. He's in your first downline. So whatever profit from his group, his cell is assigned to the office that month, you as his first upline gets 50% of that. Okay. So profit shares are a real thing. I've been benefiting from since 2013. And so when you're doing deals and you hear you hear your leadership talk about this in team meetings and stuff, and if you're working with someone across the aisle, and we say that, the other co-broker, and there's someone who seems really on the ball and ethical and honest, then by all means say, hey, do you really like working for XYZ? And, what do they offer you? And you can suggest that they meet with your team leader, and you do a warm meet. You let them know that your team leader is going to call them, and then they can come and be part of your downline. Or if you run into someone who's a brand new agent and their contract is written really poorly, and I don't mean this to be funny, they're not being trained. They have a great personality. You like to work with them, but their contract's a mess. You can say, hey, our office really likes to teach our agents the contract. Has anyone ever really taught you about the contract? And here's some of the things that are offered, but talk to my team leader. They can really go over to the benefits are. Because, out there in the marketplace, people say things about Keller Williams or about us even That's not true. It's not true. You know, I've had things said about me that were totally false, things I would have never said, words I've never used in my life attributed to me because someone lied, you know. And furthermore, I had laryngitis when it happened, so I couldn't even talk. But someone got mad, attributed something to me that was not me, and, you know, and put things out there. So once it's out there, it's hard to take back, you know. So so you want to, you know, you always want to have good relationships with the other side, and but, you know, encourage people. If you see someone and you're not sure how to approach them, you know, talk to your team leader. Okay.
You know, he had said, Chris had said at one time that if you work with an agent on the other side that has done a really good job, and you could just put it like, you know, you guys did a really fabulous job. I'd like to have my team leader call and thank you.
Yes.
You would
Great.
like to call and thank you
Right.
and let him do it.
Right. So Sherry was saying that, you know, Chris and the other team leaders do this as well, that if someone did a really great job on the other side, and you can say, you've done a really great job, my team leader, I like to have them call and thank you for such a professional job you did. And then as long as they agree and the team leader calls, then it's up to the team leader to take it from there. Okay. And then, you know, that's a way to build your profit share. And, you know, Gary Keller set this up a long time ago, and you can go online and look up the profit share tree. All that's accessible. You can go and look up, you can go in there and look up me and see how much I've made in profit share since 2013. Because it's all open and available. Keller Williams is open and available for everybody. If you want to know how to do it, I'll tell you guys tomorrow.
Please do.
Then you can spend your days looking at that and not learning your contracts. No, don't do it. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow at 10. And text you if you have any questions.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you again, Deb.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Debbie,
Yes.
can I ask while everybody, that DPOR